Have you ever had that moment you wish you could rewind time, right or wrong, and finally let go of a regret that's been weighing you down for years? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Wherever you are, welcome to Motivation for Success, the channel that brings you powerful stories to inspire a fresh perspective on life. Before we dive into this moving tale about one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have countless stories that will empower, encourage, and fuel your personal growth journey. Today's story centers on Keanu Reeves, legendary action star and master of heartfelt performances, and a long-lost colleague he thought was gone forever. By the end, you'll be reminded of the fragility of relationships and the power of forgiveness. So, are you ready to hear about the moment Keanu Reeves revealed a regret so profound it brought him to tears on live television? Let's begin. The Los Angeles studio buzzed with excitement, its crimson curtains glowing under golden spotlights. The air crackled with anticipation as murmurs filled the room. At the center of the stage, two sleek chairs faced each other beside a glass table adorned with white roses. When the applause sign flashed, the crowd erupted. The host, sharp in a navy blue suit, stepped out, greeting the audience with effortless charm before making the long-awaited introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "please welcome the one and only, Keanu Reeves." A renewed wave of thunderous applause swept the studio as Keanu Reeves stepped out from the side of the stage. He moved with an understated grace, a subtle combination of humility and confidence. His dark hair, threaded with a few silver strands, fell just past his jawline. He wore a charcoal gray blazer over a black button-down shirt and well-fitted trousers. His entrance brought an almost tangible spark of excitement to the room. A slight, genuine smile curved his lips, the same smile that had graced countless red carpets and made fans around the world adore him. Despite his immense fame, something about him felt utterly down-to-earth. Perhaps it was the gentle expression in his eyes or the way he seemed genuinely touched by the audience's enthusiastic welcome. As he settled into the chair opposite the host, Keanu leaned forward in a relaxed posture. Although he appeared calm, there was a certain tension in his hands, his fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, betraying a touch of nerves. The host allowed the applause to subside before speaking. "Keanu, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here tonight," the host said warmly, his voice resonating through the overhead speakers. "You've been a cultural icon for decades now, star of movies that have defined entire genres, from high-octane action to thought-provoking science fiction. How does it feel to look back at such a storied career?" Keanu let out a soft chuckle, leaning back slightly as he considered the question. "It's, pretty surreal, honestly," he replied, his voice carrying that familiar blend of modesty and warmth. "I've been fortunate to work on projects that have changed my life and, hopefully, made an impact on others. But at the end of the day, I'm just grateful to still be here, still doing what I love." The audience clapped politely. Their faces were wrapped with attention, waiting to see if Keanu would reveal any new insights or behind-the-scenes stories from his illustrious career. Yet, no one could have predicted the emotional journey they were about to witness. Clearing his throat, the host leaned in closer. "You've achieved a level of success most could only dream of. But no life is without its regrets or unfulfilled wishes. Is there anything left on your bucket list? Anything you look back on now and think, 'I wish I had done that differently'?" A glimmer of something flickered in Keanu's eyes, an unspoken memory or regret that seemed to tighten his otherwise composed features. He paused, the silence stretching just a little too long for comfort. The audience, sensing a shift, quieted almost instantly. The host let the hush linger, giving Keanu room to decide if he wanted to speak. Keanu exhaled slowly. He ran a hand through his dark hair and looked momentarily at the floor. "That's a deep question," he said at last. "I've been asked similar questions over the years, but usually, I sidestep them, give some philosophical response about life's winding roads or mention the unpredictability of fate. The truth is, I do have one regret. Something I should have made right a very long time ago. His voice dropped lower as he spoke, the microphone amplifying the soft tremor in each word. The audience held its collective breath, riveted by this candid admission. The air felt heavier now, almost charged with the weight of an untold story. Somewhere in the back row, a woman shifted in her seat, reflexively clasping her hands as though preparing to console a friend. The host's voice remained calm and empathetic. "You're among friends here, Keanu," he said gently. "We'd love to hear whatever you feel comfortable sharing." Keanu lifted his gaze from the floor, his expression a mixture of sorrow and hesitation. "Well," he began, swallowing hard. "If I'm going to talk about this, I need to start at the beginning." Keanu's memories seemed to swirl before him like a colorful film reel from decades past. Closing his eyes momentarily, he allowed himself to slip into a recollection that still carried the vivid intensity of youth. "It was the 90s, he said softly. "I had just come off a couple of roles that put me on the map, Speed, and soon afterward, the first hints of The Matrix. Suddenly, everything changed. I went from doing small or mid-budget films to headlining major studio pictures. People started treating me differently, doors that were once closed were flung wide open. There was an almost tangible energy in the studio, like leaning forward to catch every detail of a whisper." Keanu's eyes reflected both the nostalgia and the weight of those early days in Hollywood, a realm of bright lights, towering sound stages, and sky-high ambitions. "I was young and excited," Keanu went on, "but I was also naive about how fame could change your life, your relationships, and the way you see yourself. One day, I was introduced to this actor, Jake Monroe. Back then, Jake was on the cusp of his own breakout. He had a raw talent that was simply magnetic. When we were put together for a series of auditions, the chemistry was immediate. We were both up-and-comers. The industry saw us as the next big duo, like we could become the faces of an entire era of action and drama." He paused again, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly in a gentle, bittersweet smile. "Jake had these piercing blue eyes, like he could see right through you. He also had this laugh that just boomed across any set we were on. To this day, I've never met anyone who could match that laughter." The audience listened raptly, and some even smiled at the thought of these two young actors forging a friendship under the bright lights of Hollywood. But something in Keanu's voice warned them that the story wouldn't remain warm and hopeful for long. Keanu recounted how he and Jake spent long hours between takes, talking about life, love, and their dreams. After grueling shoots, they'd grab late-night burgers and milkshakes, marveling at the surreal journey of chasing fame together. Their bond was almost brotherly, shaped by shared struggles, navigating sudden recognition and relentless media scrutiny. He painted the memory so vividly that the studio audience could almost see it. The peppery French fries at a tiny diner off Sunset Boulevard. The cool night air as they sped through deserted Hollywood streets at 2 a.m. Neon signs reflecting off rain-soaked asphalt, casting surreal pinks and purples. They laughed over flubbed lines, confided in each other's fears of being typecast, and crashed at each other's apartments, dreaming of their next big break. Their synergy felt unstoppable, until it wasn't. Keanu's eyes glistened as the weight of the past settled in. You could sense the moment everything changed, the fork in the road where it all went wrong. Sometimes success can be as destructive as failure, Keanu said quietly. We got to a place where we were both being sought after for leading roles. The studios wanted us, together. It was the ultimate Hollywood dream come true. But then, when money, contracts, and top billing get thrown into the mix, everything can change in an instant. He glanced sideways, as though searching for the right words to describe a mistake he still regretted deeply. For a couple of guys who had never seen that level of fame and fortune, it was overwhelming. Suddenly, there were agents, managers, producers, everyone had an opinion on what was best for us. People were whispering in our ears, fueling our egos. I wish I could say I was above it, but I wasn't. Keanu ran a hand over his face, a clear gesture of pain. His voice took on a tremor. Jake was a little more hot-headed than I was. He believed he deserved certain perks or recognition. And you know what? He probably did. But at the time, I was so focused on my own climb that I didn't stop to think about what was fair. I remember we were negotiating a film deal, something that was supposed to be our big break as co-leads. A certain producer suggested that I get top billing because I was slightly more famous at the moment. When Jake got wind of that, he was furious. And in my arrogance, I thought, well, I deserve it. A hush fell over the crowd. Keanu's voice grew unsteady, full of remorse. I should have fought for him. I should have said, no, we're equals here, and we both want to be treated fairly. But I didn't. I let my ego take the wheel. It's such a trivial thing, top billing, but it represented everything we'd been working for. I felt validated by it, and he felt betrayed. The talk show audience leaned in, some already dabbing at the corners of their eyes. This was the moment where the rift between Keanu and Jake reached a point of no return. Keanu described the confrontation in vivid detail, how they met in a small production office on a cloudy afternoon, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Jake stood there, his expression a storm of resentment and hurt. Papers were strewn across a table, contract details, salary negotiations, promotional obligations. As soon as Keanu walked in, Jake demanded answers. Why had Keanu accepted the top billing without consulting him? Why had Keanu's agent made decisions that disregarded their friendship? Words were exchanged, harsh, stinging words that neither man truly meant but couldn't hold back. Keanu recalled Jake's voice echoing in that cramped space, I thought we were partners. I thought we were friends. When Keanu tried to defend himself, to explain that he didn't orchestrate the producer's decision, Jake shook his head, tears of rage and sorrow welling in his eyes. I stood there, fists clenched, Keanu said, his voice cracking. Not sure if I was angrier at him for accusing me or at myself for letting it get that far. We both said awful things, things only close friends know how to hurt each other with. By the time I stormed out of that office, I was convinced we were done. The memory lingered in the air like a ghost. Each word weighed down by regret. In the weeks that followed, Keanu and Jake didn't speak. The studio replaced Jake with another actor, and he quietly slipped off the Hollywood radar. Their once promising collaborative future evaporated. Keanu's career, however, soared to unimaginable heights with a string of major hits. He went on to star in films that would become cultural touchstones, while Jake's name eventually faded from industry chatter. I remember, at first, I was almost relieved, Keanu confessed, voice tinged with shame. I told myself I didn't need him, that I would be fine on my own. And I was fine. But years later, I realized I'd lost something irreplaceable. It wasn't just about missing out on a great acting partnership, I'd lost a friend who mattered to me. My pride and ego had stolen that from me. Sitting there on the talk show stage, Keanu's shoulders visibly slumped under the weight of this memory. The overhead spotlights highlighted the sadness etched in his features. The crowd watched him with empathy, some discreetly wiping away tears. Did you ever try to reach out to him afterward? The host asked softly, breaking through the solemn silence. Keanu shook his head, a wave of regret washing over his face. I told myself I would, year after year. But then something else would come up, another movie, another appearance, a charity event. I always had a reason to postpone that phone call, that visit, that chance to say I was sorry. And eventually, I heard Jake had just vanished from the scene. I had no idea where he went. The studio was so quiet now that you could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning system. Keanu's gaze dropped to his hands, clenched together in a tight knot. That regret haunted me, he murmured. With every new success, I felt a pang of guilt, a voice in my head that said, you should have handled that differently. It's a heavy thing, living with an unspoken apology. Years turned into decades. I'd read tabloids or online gossip occasionally, seeing if Jake's name would pop up. It never did. I thought about hiring someone to track him down, but I was afraid he wouldn't want to see me. A few members of the audience audibly sniffled. There's something universally heartbreaking about the idea of leaving a relationship broken, never knowing if it can be repaired, and living with the knowledge it was within your power to try. The host laid a comforting hand on Keanu's shoulder. If you could speak to him now, what would you say? At that, Keanu's composure nearly broke. He took a moment, inhaling deeply to steady himself. When he spoke again, his voice was choked with emotion. I'd tell him I was wrong, so wrong. I'd tell him none of the fame, none of the movies, none of the accolades matter in comparison to the relationships that shape who we are. I'd ask him to forgive me, if he could. A charged hush fell over the studio. Time seemed to slow as everyone waited to see if Keanu would add anything more. But before he could continue, the host offered a small, knowing smile. His eyes glimmered with a secret, something the audience hadn't anticipated. Keanu, he said softly, what if it wasn't too late? What if Jake Monroe was here tonight? The crowd reacted with a collective gasp, the hush erupting into excited chatter. Some rose from their seats, craning their necks to see if the host's words were more than just a dramatic twist. Keanu's eyes widened in disbelief, a rush of emotion flooding his features, hope, fear, confusion all danced across his face. You're joking, Keanu managed, his voice almost inaudible. The host shook his head and turned toward the curtains at the edge of the stage, where shadows danced in the overhead lights. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jake Monroe. The stage curtains trembled. Out stepped a figure, slightly older and leaner than the man Keanu remembered, but unmistakably Jake Monroe. His silver-streaked hair was cropped close, and he wore a simple leather jacket, faded jeans, and boots that had seen better days. There was a flicker of surprise and apprehension in his eyes as he faced the bright glare of the stage lights. The audience broke into applause, part excitement and part sheer relief at this unexpectedly emotional reunion. Jake raised a hand in an awkward wave, his gaze locked on Keanu's. In that moment, they were no longer movie stars or talk show guests, they were two old friends, forcibly confronted with a lifetime of unresolved emotions. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Keanu was rooted to his seat, staring up at Jake like he was seeing a ghost. Jake stood there, shoulders tense, his eyes scanning Keanu's face for, what exactly? Regret? Apology? Longing? Some mixture of all three. Then, as though compelled by something beyond conscious thought, Keanu rose. He walked across the stage, the distance feeling like miles instead of mere feet. When he finally stood in front of Jake, the entire audience held their breath, the cameras zooming in to capture every nuance of this extraordinary moment. Keanu cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Hey, Jake, he said softly, as if they were the only two people in the room. Jake tilted his head, taking a moment to study Keanu's face. His own expression was guarded, perhaps still laced with old resentments. But beneath the tough exterior, there was a hint of something warmer, maybe relief, maybe recognition of a bond that time and circumstance had never fully erased. Hey, Reeves, Jake replied, calling him by the nickname he had always used years ago, before everything fell apart. An audible sigh of suspense swept through the crowd. The host, standing at a respectful distance, seemed unsure whether to intervene or let the two men handle this on their own. Ultimately, he chose silence, giving them the space they needed. Keanu's eyes glistened under the stage lights. Jake, I'm sorry, he blurted out, the words tumbling from his mouth in a rush. I should have said this a long time ago. I was selfish. I let the industry, my ego, and the allure of fame get in the way of our friendship. You deserved better. Jake swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he wrestled with his own roiling emotions. You know, it takes a lot for a man to admit he was wrong, he began, eyes reflecting a mixture of hurt and something else, maybe gratitude. After all these years. I wasn't sure I'd ever hear you say that. Keanu nodded, heart pounding so loudly he thought everyone in the studio might hear it. I should have reached out, he continued. God knows how many times I picked up the phone, even started dialing your number, only to hang up because I was too scared. Jake shifted on his feet, looking down at the floor. I wasn't much better, he admitted quietly. I was mad, yeah, but I also knew you had your reasons. I guess I felt abandoned. So I left Hollywood altogether. I moved up north for a while, tried to find myself. Eventually, people stopped calling, so I let them. I never knew if you wanted to reconnect or not. The audience watched, transfixed, as two men navigated decades of pent-up sorrow and regret. One woman in the front row clutched her friend's arm, tears streaming down her cheeks. It felt like the entire room was collectively holding its breath, awaiting the resolution of a story that had been left incomplete for far too long. After another beat of tense silence, Jake exhaled, his posture softening. He took a small step forward and extended his hand. Life's too short to hold on to grudges, he said, voice cracking just a bit. I missed our friendship. Keanu stared at the outstretched hand for a moment, and then, without hesitation, he engulfed Jake in a tight embrace. The applause that erupted from the audience was deafening. It was as though a wave of relief, joy, and collective catharsis swept through the entire studio. Tears glistened on more than a few faces, and even the host dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Keanu pulled back, hands still resting on Jake's shoulders. I missed it too, he whispered, wiping the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. Anne. I know we can't go back in time. But maybe we can start again. Jake's lips curved into a small smile, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling with sincerity. I'd like that. The host finally stepped forward, a huge grin on his face. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Keanu Reeves and Jake Monroe, he cheered, raising both arms in celebration. The crowd leaped to their feet with a standing ovation that thundered through the studio. Camera flashes lit up the stage as if capturing a piece of cinematic history. Keanu and Jake lingered in their hug for a second longer, both men seemingly marveling at the surreal nature of reconciling so openly, and on live TV, no less. But sometimes, the universe has a way of arranging moments of profound healing exactly where they're meant to happen. After the show cut to a commercial break, the host guided both men off stage. Production assistants buzzed around, offering water bottles and tissues. Keanu thanked them, still emotional but visibly lighter, as though a lifelong burden had been lifted. Jake looked around, somewhat dazed by the bustling environment he'd left behind so many years ago. They found a quiet corner backstage, near a rack of stage lights and folded curtains. The overhead fluorescence bathed them in a stark, utilitarian glow. The smell of coffee and electrical equipment lingered in the air. Voices echoed through the corridors, producers, camera operators, script supervisors, but in that moment, it felt like only the two of them existed. Jake leaned against the wall and exhaled. I can't believe this, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. After all these years. Who would have thought our reunion would happen on television? Keanu gave a small, almost shy laugh. Ironic, right? We spent our 20s performing for the camera, and we end up with our most real moment caught on live broadcast. Jake nodded. Yeah. Real is definitely the word. Then his tone turned more serious. Look, Reeves, if this is a second chance, I want us to do it right. No half measures. No letting the industry or anything else get in the way. Keanu met Jake's gaze, eyes full of sincerity. Deal, he said simply, extending a hand once more. They shook on it, sealing a promise that had been decades in the making. The show eventually came back from commercial, and the host. invited Keanu and Jake to sit together on the stage for a short follow-up segment. The cheers from the audience had only grown louder, fueled by social media buzz that was likely exploding with the news of this unexpected reconciliation. As they took their seats, the host grinned ear to ear. "I think I can speak for everyone when I say, that was one of the most profound moments we've ever witnessed on this program. Keanu, Jake, how do you both feel right now?" Jake responded first, flipping the collar of his leather jacket in a humble gesture. "A little overwhelmed, to be honest," he admitted. "But also, I feel good. Like maybe I can finally put a lot of old baggage behind me." Keanu nodded. "Same here. This moment, it's something I never thought I'd get. I owe you, Jake, and I appreciate you giving me another chance." The audience erupted into applause again. Through teary eyes and broad smiles, people recognized that they were watching something more compelling than any scripted performance: true human connection, forgiveness, and the healing of old wounds. "I think there's a lesson here for all of us," the host said, once the applause had died down. "It's never too late to mend a broken bridge or apologize for mistakes that weigh on your conscience. Look at these two, living proof that time can heal, but sometimes you need the courage to face the past." Jake turned to Keanu, nodding in agreement. "Absolutely. Holding on to anger only poisons your life. Letting go of it, well, that's when you can truly move on." For a final time, the host asked the audience to applaud. The cameras panned across the crowd, capturing faces etched with a mixture of tears, smiles, and thoughtful reflections. Moments later, the show wrapped, and the screen faded to black. The day Keanu Reeves broke down on live TV left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. The raw display of vulnerability, regret, and eventual forgiveness served as a powerful reminder that even the most successful among us carry regrets. And sometimes, those regrets revolve around relationships we've allowed to wither or become estranged due to pride, misunderstanding, or simple neglect. In the weeks that followed the broadcast, the entertainment media buzzed with headlines about the unexpected reunion. Yet, beyond the tabloids and social media chatter, something far more meaningful took root in the hearts of viewers. They found themselves pondering their own unresolved conflicts, family members they hadn't spoken to in years, friends who had drifted away after a minor spat, or colleagues they once admired but fell out with due to professional rivalries. The moral is simple yet profound: life is too short to let ego and pride destroy what truly matters, our connections to one another. Reconciliation might not always be possible, but taking the first step, offering that first apology, or extending that initial olive branch can be the turning point from regret to redemption. When Keanu confessed his regret and reunited with Jake on live television, millions of people saw themselves in his story. They saw how easily a promising relationship can crumble when communication breaks down, and how regret can hang over one's life like a storm cloud for years, even when the world sees you as nothing short of wildly successful. That day, Keanu Reeves and Jake Monroe reminded the world that it's never too late to mend fences, to choose healing over pride. Whether you've achieved global stardom or you're simply someone trying to find your path in life, the same truth applies: what matters most are the genuine bonds we forge with others. Trophies, accolades, and financial success lose their luster without people to share them with. So, as we close out this emotionally charged story, I invite you to take a moment and reflect: is there someone you need to forgive or apologize to? Is there a phone call or a message you've been putting off because you're afraid or unsure how it will be received? It might be someone you haven't spoken to in years, or it could be someone you just had a falling out with last week. Whatever the situation, I encourage you to reach out, mend that relationship, or at least take the first step. And while you're in this reflective space, let's keep the conversation going. Share in the comments below if Keanu and Jake's story reminded you of a time you had to repair a relationship, or if it's motivated you to do so now. Together, we can learn from each other's experiences and foster a community built on understanding, empathy, and growth. Thank you for watching, or reading, this special feature on Motivation for Success. Stories like Keanu's remind us of the power of honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to make things right. If you found value in this message, remember to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. We have many more inspiring stories lined up, true accounts of triumph, forgiveness, and life lessons that will enrich your journey. Until next time, stay motivated, stay kind, and never forget that it's never too late for a heartfelt apology and a fresh start. Subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep building a community that believes in second chances.